Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Landau. Like Jose said, I'm a backend software engineer at Disney. I'm currently working on a team called the Cloud Native Engineering Team, and we are within the advertising space of Disney technology. So as a backend engineer, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with like what the day-to-day life looks like. So I just wanted to kind of walk through what my responsibilities are in my position at Disney. So my main job function is that I write Java microservices, and we work closely with the product team to figure out what requirements are needed for new services, and then we write that core business logic and deploy it to production so that users can use it. On a day-to-day basis, I could be doing anything from building out or debugging issues in our pipelines, in our deployments that we do to Kubernetes or in AWS. I could be writing unit tests, API tests, performance tests. Our group has a culture of shift left testing. That's kind of the mindset that we promote in our group. So that means you test a lot early on. I find bugs early on in the production process. And that means you'll have to do less manual testing later on in the process. So we could be doing that. We do a lot of infrastructure as code. So I work with Terraform mostly, or you could use CloudFormation if you're working in AWS to build out infrastructure resources that you need for your projects. I could be working with databases, designing database schema, migrating any data, cleaning up any data that we need in our services. I could be working on messaging queues. So, for asynchronous communication between different services, you could be building out the Kafka clusters and setting up topics and permissions and things like that. Also, a lot of the work revolves around code repositories, like merge requests, reviewing other people's merge requests, or asking them to review mine, and doing a lot of regression testing around any new code that we're adding to our development pipelines and to our services. I could be also working on documentation. We do a lot of documenting of all of our services just to make sure that if we have to pass it on to a new team, they have a good knowledge base to build off of. We do a lot of report generation, so anything from the testing to manual testing of things will generate a lot of reports for that for our management to see. And then I could be working on like POCs, proof of concepts for any future work, finding any kind of requirements that we might need for future work that we plan on doing on services. And then I think you guys are all familiar with this. We do a lot of meetings. So especially now with COVID times, there's meetings all day long where you're either giving help to somebody else or you're getting help for something that you're working on. So that's kind of like what I'm doing in my daily work life. There's a lot of different places where you could be a back engineer and do something maybe a little differently. Maybe you'll do some or none of those things. So it really depends on which company you end up working at and what the team is like and what your position will require. So after that, I just wanted to give a personal overview. So I just want to talk about how did I find my way into computer science, and then talk about when you have that blank resume when you're first starting out, how do you slowly build up small chunks of experience that could end up, helping you get your foot in the door for like an internship or a full-time job position when you graduate. So I'll start off with just a brief summary of me. I'm originally South African. I immigrated to the US when I was around 14. We lived all over. I lived in England for a while. I lived around the US in Virginia and Wyoming. In all of the places I lived, I never took a computer science class. It wasn't really an option at any of the places I went, especially for like high school or middle school. It wasn't something I ever thought I could have a career in, mostly because I never had that exposure at a younger age. And so when I was 18, I decided I would go to Boston University, which is in Boston, Massachusetts in the US. I wanted to study pre-med because that was a topic I was always interested in. But while I was there, I was taking all these courses and I didn't really like the restrictions that they place on when you declare yourself a pre-med major, now you can no longer take courses in like the fine arts or things like that. And I've always been very creative as well. Like I love any kind of drawing, painting, just working with my hands, building things, kind of projects like that. So I found it was very limiting to be only allowed to study a certain amount of courses and not be able to take courses in what I wanted to learn. So in my spare time, I was making clothing. That was my like new hobby at the time. And so I ended up dropping out of my first college and applying to a fashion design school. It's called Parsons, the New School for Design. It's in New York City. And I loved it. Like I interned on the runway shows for Oscar de la Renta, who's a high fashion designer there. And I love the creative process and putting things together, making dresses, making, you know, basically anything, and the hard work that goes into it. But it's just not, I'm sure you guys have seen like The Devil Wears Prada and things like that. It's not a very friendly industry. It can be very cutthroat. And I found that it wasn't a great fit for my personality. So although I loved the creative aspect of it, I didn't really think that the industry would be a good fit for me long term. And so with that kind of discovery, I decided, you know, I'm not gonna pursue this. And so I dropped out of my second college and I didn't know what to do with myself. So I decided I was going to move to the Florida Keys to teach scuba diving. So I was there for a little bit, doing that, kind of just traveling, learning a little bit. I was around 20 at the time. And after that, I spent some time there, and then I moved out to Wyoming, where I did a course to become an emergency medical technician because I wanted to work on the ambulances. And then sometime later, I ended up moving to Charleston, South Carolina, which I was waitressing there for about a year before I decided, you know, I think it's time I went back to school. And somewhere along the way, you know, somebody had said to me, hey, you know, if you like science and math, but you're also really creative, you should give computer science a try. And so I didn't really know what jobs there were out there in computer science. It seemed like just something that it wasn't going to work for me, but I was able to get in-state tuition at the time. So I applied, I got in, I declared myself a computer science major, and I said, I can always try it and switch if I don't like it. And I loved it from, you know, the first Python program that we wrote. It's always been, it's just such a great blend of being really creative, but also having to have some kind of structure in like the data types that you're using, and the algorithms that you're using to get to your final solution. So I feel like if somebody had asked me at that point, you know, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, there's no way I could have guessed how it was going to work out. I didn't even know if I was going to stay in that field, you know, and I always hate those questions because how are you supposed to answer that, right? So like I said, I wanted to go over just the steps that I took from having absolutely no CS background at all to slowly like adding small things to my resume to kind of get that first job or get that first internship. So the first couple of things I did were after the second semester. I think I had completed the Python course and then an intro to Java course. When one of my professors had a connection at the local hospital, and he said, hey, there's a research lab here. They just need somebody to basically input Excel spreadsheets, do something to the data, and output the spreadsheet. So I did that. That was one of my first like summer jobs. Nothing too complex. I more just had to learn to use LabVIEW, which is one of the software that they were using there. So after that, I signed up to be part of the virtual reality research lab. This was a research lab where there was another student who would be in charge of developing a virtual reality game. And then my part was basically taking my creative background and being able to lay out how the story was going to work for the game. So there was absolutely no coding involved here. It was just my way of like getting involved with a project where I could see code being developed in Unity at the time. So another thing I did was I signed up to be a computer science tutor at the library. I was only a couple semesters in, so you would think like, hey, I don't know enough to teach other people, but you sign up and then they give you the younger students to start off with so that you are familiar with what they're working on and you're able to help. And this ended up being really good practice for coding interviews later on, because basically students come up to you with uh, questions about something they're not able to solve, and they they put you on the spot and you're kind of thrown in the deep end and you have to help them figure out what the problems are. So it's a lot like a coding interview in that way, where you're put on the spot and then it's kind of like with someone looking over your shoulder, you have to help figure out what the solution is. Um, I also signed up to be a student ambassador for the department. So this basically involved just doing a lot of volunteer work, going to events, helping plan and organize programming competitions, things like that. And this just gives you the ability to meet a lot of people in your department and then hear about things that are happening and become more involved. And it means you actually end up liking it more the more involved you are. And also, of course, like I joined all the student clubs. So there was a women in tech club, an ACM club, cybersecurity. I started going to programming competitions, even though I didn't know what I was doing. And you just get better at it. The first time's always intimidating, and you just get better the more you do it. I also did a couple cybersecurity competitions, which just kind of, was my way of figuring out what I would do if I was going into that field. So it was just kind of like research for my own path. And then like one of the first bigger things I did was I joined the drone research lab. So I was one of two students in the lab, and the professor wanted us to do self-motivated research where we would use the DJI SDK and develop an iOS application, and then use Nuance's voice recognition SDK to write an application basically where you could tell the drone intuitive voice commands. So, hey, drone, take off, fly left, fly right, go up, go down, things like that. This was a good project because you were kind of thrown in the deep end again. There was no correct solution out there, and there was basically nobody to tell me what I was doing was right or going in the right direction. So this was, it's good to kind of help you research what kind of problems, research the problems you're facing and find a solution on your own and use your creative mind for that. We ended up writing a short research paper for this and submitted it to a conference in Austria called the Human Robot Interaction Conference. And so when I got accepted for that, I was able to travel to Vienna, Austria, and present the research, which was pretty awesome. Our group also, a big group of us, started a Google Ignite CS program at our college, where we would go every 2 weeks and teach a local middle school computer science concepts. We help plan the sessions and run the sessions. So anything from like robotics to HTML, website development to UI design with cutting out paper and placing them in different places. It was a lot of fun. I also applied to be a Google Women Techmaker Scholar. So this is an awesome scholarship where in December every year you can apply to be part of this group, and you get a large scholarship out of it, and also a trip to the headquarters the next summer where you can meet the other scholarship recipients. And that was such a cool experience, just because you're meeting people with similar mindsets to you from all over the country. And just it just was very memorable, and it was a great experience. A lot of people ask me, how do you apply for these scholarships? What did you say to get that scholarship? There's no real answer to that question. All I can say is that I have reviewed scholarships myself now for Bryce Hopper Conference, the celebration, and other things. And I always notice that the applicants that are more honest about what challenges they're facing and things that they're interested in, just if you let a lot of your personality shine in your writing, those are the ones that I gravitate towards more when I'm reviewing things like that. So other things to slowly add up to your resume. I also added my senior capstone project was a good one. So any projects that you're working on in school, you can also add those to your resume if you're kind of finding that you have a lot of blank space. This is how I got my first internship. They were really interested in my research with drones and the senior capstone project that I did. So I ended up working at a company called Blackbaud in South Carolina, where I did a full stack engineering internship with Angular on the front end, a .NET Core backend. So I had to learn C# kind of on the fly. And I loved this internship. It was such a great way to contrast what life would be like in the tech world versus what I had seen as an intern in the fashion industry. You know, people were so excited to help you and to teach you and wanted to include you in everything. So it felt like a much better fit for me long term. I was also lucky enough to be a Grace Hopper Celebration Scholarship recipient. So if you're unfamiliar, this is a huge conference they do in the US every October. And I think there were like 25,000 2 years ago when I went in person or something. It's massive. And basically it's a huge celebration of diversity in tech, wanting to be supportive of getting a more diverse tech space. So this was where I actually did my interview for Disney. So I met my manager here. The nice thing about the Grace Hopper celebration is if you're looking for a job, there's a massive database you can add your resume to, and then over the upcoming months before actually getting to the conference, you'll get contacted by recruiters, you'll be sent programming questions, things like that. And I did about 50 different interviews before I even got to the conference. Like I was going a little bit overboard. I took interviews in my car, on the sidewalk, in the library, like anywhere I could. I definitely don't recommend doing that because it's very stressful. You should probably focus on like 20 companies that you're interested in instead. But Disney was one of the companies that reached out to me. So I did interviews with the recruiter. I did an interview with my manager on FaceTime. And then when I got to the actual conference, I met him in person, did a coding challenge with him. And then the next week I flew out to LA to do the full day interview with the bigger team. So, you know, Disney, when they gave me an offer, I was very surprised because I honestly didn't know that Disney had that much use for software engineers at the time. I didn't really know that Disney was a technology focused company. And now that I'm working there, you know, it's very obvious that there's so much you can do in such a large company in the tech space. There's so many different jobs that are available for anything that you're looking for there, which is pretty cool. And then just to wrap us up, so I also did a machine learning internship my final semester of my senior year, which was really awesome. I did it for a company called Netrist Solutions, and it was learning how to apply machine learning concepts to some of their business questions that they had from their clients. So this was not something I had experience in. I didn't study anything to do with data science in school, but it was also a good way to learn what that field could be like as well. Then I graduated, I got my Bachelor of Science degree in computer science, and I moved out to LA afterwards. So just a couple things I wanted to note here. You know, there's no checklist. I wasn't following any checklist, or there was no set way of doing things to get from point A to point B. I did anything I could find that was available at the time. And basically you just do small steps and it builds up to bigger steps. So if you're at the point in your career path where you're kind of struggling to both get the experience to get an internship, like sometimes it can be a catch-22 where like you want the experience but you don't have it yet, so how are you supposed to apply to get more experience to put it on your resume? It can be very like intimidating to start out, but I'm just saying if you do small things like this, you slowly can make your way there. and then also, you know, like there's a lot of people out there that already know what they want to do. They already have a set idea, but I was one of the people that need to try it before I like it, before I really know I want to pursue that. So that's why I had such a kind of like windy journey to where I am now. Um, yeah, so, and then I also just wanted to note, you know, the journey doesn't end when you get your job. So there's still so much more you can learn when you start your first job. You can learn more about the company. You can talk to the people you work with. You want to get involved with the company so that you can feel like you're like part of the whole, right? Take advantage of any perks they have, any meetups they have. Find some mentors that you want to work with and be taught by, and then maybe you can be a mentor later on to somebody that's entering their first career path. Always give back, you know, try to teach others what you've learned. That helps you solidify your knowledge as well. And volunteering is always great. Definitely, I want to say, like, promote having diversity and inclusion in your workplace. Disney is actually really awesome for this. Like, there was a lot of diversity on my group, which has been really good from the start. But I just want to say, like, you should always promote that. Like, the more the merrier, right? Like, we should have all kinds of points of views. And yeah, so one of the things I do most is I like to talk to people about what they work on. I like to see it when people light up because they're so excited about a website that they're working on, or the small app or script or something. And when they get excited and they tell you and explain the ins and outs, you're using their excitement to kind of drive your own education about the things that they're working on. It's just a really good way to learn, like, what's out there. So yeah, so thanks guys for listening. Hope you guys know that you're entering like a really cool space, and I'm excited to see where you are 5 years from now.